Have you ever wanted to run PHP with just JavaScript? Probably not, right? Well, you can. You can actually execute raw PHP code using just JavaScript, and it's all powered by WebAssembly. If you're unaware of it, WebAssembly is a binary instruction format. It is a executable language compiled specifically for use in the browser. Now, WebAssembly was created and has been around since about 2018, but it's mostly kind of been hidden among the shadows and some specific niche groups. But it allows us to compile programs that are built in languages like C, C++, Python, Go, and Rust, and actually execute them in the browser. So we don't have to download an application to a user's desktop. We can just embed it in a website and have it run as if it were a native application. And this has led to some pretty interesting projects. So for instance, Salty NES, an emulator written in WebAssembly for NES games, and a fully functioning N64 WebAssembly emulator as well. But the thing that really caught my eye is this, the WordPress playground. So this might just look like a WordPress site that is embedded in a browser window, but this is actually isolated to just my browser. This entire WordPress instance does not exist outside of my current browser instance. This isn't piped from an external server or any kind of cloud hardware. This exists only in my browser. And I can change the settings for it. So if instead I want to run this on PHP 8.2 with a different WordPress version, I can apply those changes and it rebuilds the entire instance for me. I can go through the admin panel and make changes, and those changes only exist in my browser. If I was to go ahead and refresh this website, it's going to prepare WordPress again for me, but the changes that I had made previously are all gone because that instance disappeared. And the cool thing about it is that this is entirely open source and available on their GitHub repo. And so I started digging into it, looking at the packages that were used in this, specifically the PHP-WASM package, which is what powers this entire engine. And so I was thinking, all right, how can I use this? So I found a couple of different ways. Okay, so this is the code that powers what you saw in like the first few seconds of this video. So if I use node php.js and then provided a string with some kind of PHP code, like echo hello world, it'll run that PHP code and then return back the result, but it's all powered by JavaScript. So I'm using this PHP-WASM node package here that is from the WordPress playground team. And then what I'm doing is I'm booting up a PHP version 8.2 using WebAssembly, creating a directory in that virtual file system called serve, and then writing a file to it that joins in the rest of the arguments from the node command that I ran. It then runs that file inside WebAssembly and then returns back to us whatever the response is that we get back. And so I got this running and it's really basic, but I wanted to add more and more layers of complexity to it. So what we can do next is actually mount files from our local environment into the WebAssembly virtual file system and run them that way. So let's go ahead and create a PHP file here, cool.php, and let's add in some basic PHP code in this. All right, so we have a list of names in an array. We filter those out to find ones that start with the letter A, and then we echo them out, all joined together with commas. So what we can do now is actually mount this file to that virtual file system that I talked about earlier. So instead of using PHP write file here, what we can do is we can call this PHP node WebAssembly object and say mount, and then give it a directory to mount to. So let's just use the current working directory of the process, and we'll mount that right in that serve directory. And now what we can do, instead of writing this file, we can remove this and we can get the file that we had created back. So we'll use this cool PHP file that we had created, which should be mounted into this virtual file system. So now if we go back to our terminal, we can run node php.js and we get back those names ran from that PHP file. So not only can we run inline PHP, we can run external PHP files as well, all using just JavaScript. But again, let's take this one step further in complexity. What if I could create a local dev environment using just JavaScript for PHP? So PHP does come with its own built-in server. If I run PHP with the capital S option, I can specify my localhost IP address and then a port added onto it. So port 8080, and it'll start a development server at 8080. So then if I go to my browser at that cool PHP file I had created, it shows the output here, and then in the terminal, I can see the file was retrieved and the output was returned back before closing that thread. And so yeah, I wanted to know if I could replicate this functionality using just JavaScript. So getting back into our source code, let's start up at the top. So this absolute URL I have set to the 3000 port. So that's the port that we're going to serve this local dev environment on. And what I'm going to do is actually use Express as a proxy. Express, as you might know, is a super fast and lightweight node application framework. So we're going to use this to actually funnel any incoming requests and send them out to this PHP WebAssembly object. It'll compile whatever files that are directed to it and then get us back whatever was returned from that WebAssembly executable. So instead of console logging out our response and getting this here, after this mount, what we're going to do is create that Express app. So we have const app is equal to Express, and we have some configuration for Express. And now we're going to set a single route all set to a single asterisk. What this means is that all of the requests that come through will pass through this route here and only this route. Let's go ahead and console out the request method and the request URL. And then what we'll do is, like before, we will get a response back from our PHP WebAssembly object. So PHP requests, and then let's just use everything that's passed into us directly from Express. And so now we can send the response back from Express. So response, we'll set the status as the response's HTTP status code. And we can say res send to send the actual response from Express. And that is just the response text we're getting back from the PHP WebAssembly executable. Now all it's left to do is actually listen on the port 3000 that we had mentioned earlier. So app listen 3000. And after the app has been initialized, let's go ahead and just console log out some information to the user. And let's get rid of this process exit down here. All right, so now all I have to do is go to our terminal and run node php.js again. And we're seeing that the server is ready at localhost 3000. So let's go ahead and open that up and see what we get back. Okay, so starting out, we are getting a 404 file not found, which is good because we don't have any indexed PHP files available in our browser. But if we navigate to cool.php, we're getting back our array of names ran through that PHP file. So this is actually a local dev environment for PHP that was created with JavaScript and Express. And just to confirm that everything is working as expected, let's go ahead and add some more PHP files to this. Okay, so I've gone ahead and added an index.php file, which should display on that main landing page. And I've added a phpinfo.php file as well, which just dumps out the PHP info. So let's go ahead and see if these work in the browser. Okay, so navigating just to localhost 3000, we get our response back of an h1 tag that has our name PHP variable added in here. And going to phpinfo.php, we are getting all of the PHP info back from that WebAssembly executable. And the cool thing about this is that these were all done without having to restart the server. This mount that we're doing from the local environment gives us kind of like a remote connection from our local environment into that virtual file system. So anything that updates in both of them works in real time. And so yeah, using all of these concepts, I ended up building something called Diode, which is a local dev environment for Laravel built on WebAssembly. It was mostly just as like an experimental thing to see if I could do it. And yeah, this was what created the foundation for that. So this allows you to run both artisan and composer commands, as well as create a new Laravel project or serve it using that Express proxy that we had just saw. And yeah, I guess where do you go from here? So WebAssembly and PHP working together is kind of interesting, and it gives us access to a lot of cool projects and puts PHP in the hands of people who might not want the environment installed locally on their machine or have to worry about something like Docker or VMs. The fact that you can also run PHP natively in your browser without having to have the code executed on a server has wide security applications as well. You don't have to worry about your server being compromised by user input if your PHP code can be isolated to just an individual user's browser instance. So yeah, really interesting stuff, and if you get the chance to experiment with it, definitely try and take it. But yeah, anyway, I think that's about it for this video. So yeah, if you have any questions about this, please feel free to let me know in the comments or on my Twitter linked below. Thanks for watching.